those are the 13 books that I 100% recommend you just check out, see if you're interested in them, and maybe add one or two to potential lists. See, even the traffic outside is excited about these titles. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Leandra, the TBR Zero, and my goal is to lessen my physical TBR one book at a time. Today though, I am actually going to be providing 13 nonfiction books that you might just want to pre-order quite soon. I'm really excited to discuss these titles. Nonfiction is something that I really love to read, but I certainly don't read enough of. So I'm trying to encourage myself and encourage you, maybe in 2024, to consider including even just one or two more nonfiction titles into your reading schedule, and yeah, I think you'll find it very beneficial. The reason why I am discussing these books is because I do have initially a few books that I immediately know that I'm going to want to buy. I'm very excited for, either because I have a personal investment in the author or an investment in the discussion that's being had within these books. I also am getting very excited for Nonfiction November. As someone, again, who doesn't read much nonfiction, I probably will only be reading one, maybe two nonfiction books if I can. Definitely going to read one for the Nonfiction November Readathon. But you know what? We're all work in progresses, and that includes trying to include more genres that we should be reading and maybe aren't prioritizing when we should. On that note, I also want to thank all of my new subscribers. I am almost at 500, which is really crazy because I just did a video thanking everyone who helped me get to 400. I will say that a lot of it is probably due to my participation as a co-host in the A Clue Readathon hosted by Rainy Blue Reads. And so thank you all for kind of taking a chance on me. I really appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of you just clicked subscribe to all of the hosts, and so you don't really know what kind of content I make. Do I even know what kind of content I make? Either way, I really appreciate your support. I hope you stick around and enjoy what I provide you as my my service on the internet. So without further ado, let's get into the video. The way this is going to work, I'm going to talk about all 13 titles, and the information I'm going to provide is title and author, publication date. I'm going to read the synopsis for each book, and then I'll probably take some time to explain what gravitated me to this specific title. One book is published or will be published in November 2023. All others have publication dates ranging from January 2024 to May 2024. So you do have a lot of time to kind of mull over your choices if you want to pre-order any of them. Just remember that pre-order numbers are so important to authors. They really appreciate it because it helps them prove to bookstores and other chains that their books are worth being put on the shelves, that libraries should be buying these copies for their public to consume. And so every pre-order counts. And so if you're really interested in this title, you know you're going to want to get it, maybe just pre-order it rather than waiting for like the day it comes out, just so you can give that author that extra little help that I'm sure they all will greatly appreciate. Okay, the first title I'm going to talk about is A City on Mars. This is by Kelly Weinersmith and Zach Weinersmith, which I think very interesting. I love it when nonfiction books are published by multiple people, multiple authors. It shows that they've kind of have a wealth of knowledge among them. Not just one person has held the brunt of research. And so while it's called A City on Mars, there is a subtitle that follows it, and that is Can We Settle Space? Should We Settle Space? And How We Really Thought This Through. This comes out November 7th, 2023, so very soon. The description says that it's from the best-selling authors of Soonish, a brilliant and hilarious off-world investigation into space settlement. Earth is not well. The promise of starting life anew, somewhere far, far away, no climate change, no war, no Twitter, beckons, and settling the stars finally seems within our grasp. Or is it? Critically acclaimed, best-selling authors Kelly and Zach Weinersmith set out to write the essential guide to a glorious future of space settlements. But after years of research, they aren't so sure it's a good idea. Space technologies and space business are progressing fast, but we lack the knowledge needed to have space kids, build space farms, and create space nations in a way that doesn't spark conflict back home. In a world hurtling toward human expansion into space, A City on Mars investigates whether the dreams of new worlds won't create nightmares. both for settlers and the people they leave behind. In the process, the Weinersmiths answer every question about space you've ever wondered about, and many you've never considered. Can we make babies in space? Should corporations govern space settlements? What about space war? Are we headed for a housing crisis on the moon's peaks of eternal light? And what happens if you're left in the craters of eternal darkness? Why do astronauts love taco sauce? Speaking of meals, what's the legal status of space cannibalism? With deep expertise, a winning sense of humor, and art from the beloved creator of Saturday morning breakfast cereal, the Weinersmiths investigate perhaps the biggest questions humanity will ever ask itself: whether and how to become multiplanetary. Get in, we're going to Mars. Doesn't that sound so interesting? I think I'm especially interested in this right at the moment because of what I've been reading in the last year or two. It's giving me a sense of A Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. Mandel, or St. John Mandel. It's also making me think of Eclipse the Moon, the second book in Jessie Mahalick's Starlight Shadow series. I've been reading a lot of space opera lately, and Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes, horror space. So I don't know, I think that I have been mentally thinking about space more often, humans' place in space and moving off of Earth or wherever the case is. And so that's definitely why this title made me think, oh my gosh, maybe I should read this, especially because I've been delving into so much fiction that is asking these same questions. So if you've also been wondering about these things, or you're also super interested in sci-fi or dystopian literature, space operas, then maybe this type of nonfiction is for you. All right, on that note, I'm switching gears very dramatically to Borgata, Rise of Empire, A History of the American Mafia. This is by Louis Ferrante, and this is our first title on my list that actually comes out in 2024. The publication date is January 2nd, 2024. I know that this seems really weird, but let me read the synopsis, then I'll explain why I'm so interested in this title. A riveting history of the mafia from 1860s Sicily to 1960s America, as narrated by a former heist expert and Gambino family mobster. The culmination, Louis Ferrante's exhaustive research delving deep into Sicily's socioeconomic political roots, Borgata, Rise of Empire, will finally reveal exactly how and why this infamous secret society formed inside Sicilian culture. Ferrante then engages in the art of storytelling by carefully selecting stories about the mafia in Sicily that allow him to follow the main characters to America, where most arrive as fugitives from Italian justice. Across the Atlantic, the storyline picks up in places like New York and New Orleans, where the clannish Sicilians quickly realize the importance of diversity as they forge new alliances with other recently arrived ethnic groups, as the Borgata becomes the premier organized criminal network in the country. After planting their flags in cities across America, the adolescent American mafia realizes how to corrupt America's police and political establishment, and they become experts at bribing public officials, allowing them to extend their tentacles into every level of American society. In this first volume, Ferrante traces the mafia's phenomenal rise of empire through larger-than-life characters such as Lucky Luciano, Vito Genovese, Mayor Lansky, Bugsy Siegel, Albert Anastasia, and other legendary mobsters as they provide alcohol to the American public during Prohibition, penetrate industrial labor unions, practically take over the island of Cuba, and with extraordinary vision, create the gambling mecca of Las Vegas. Honestly, I know that this is probably really weird for some people, but I am so intrigued by the American Mafia. And this has nothing to do with the fact that I guess my family history is predominantly from Italy, but it is partially kind of a part of that, especially because we hear so often how Italian immigrants have evolved into this very different type of identity, American Italians, which I find very interesting, and how this kind of organized crime institute is just so old, and while it's not as prevalent or well known or discussed today, it was huge, especially because of prohibition allowing for organized crime. That's also why the hard-boiled detective fiction genre became so popular during that time. It allowed to kind of open up a can of worms as far as, you know, corruption within politics, corruption within the police force, and then just, yeah, like organized crime flourished during that time. And so I'm very interested. I think it's just super interesting. I really like watching documentaries on the American Mafia and just seeing how it progressed, how it got into labor unions as well. I remember growing up, my father telling me his own kind of weird run-ins. I promise my dad's not a mobster, but his own experiences witnessing it in upstate New York, even how it had a lot of reach beyond the major cities. And so, yeah, I have this huge fascination with it. With that said, do I know very much about it? No, not to my standard. I think I'm probably still a novice in understanding this kind of world, this kind of specific area in American history, but I do think it's very interesting. I own a few titles, a few books that do focus on the American Mafia, but I haven't read those yet. And so as interested as I am in Borgata, Rise of Empire, I probably will hold off. But maybe it's the title for you. The next 4 books I'm going to talk about all come out at some time in February 2024. The first one I'll talk about, though, is called Invisibility Intimacy: Essays on Love, Care, and Desire. This is by Alice Wong, and the cover is gorgeous. It's very simple, but I really enjoy it. I like the fact that it's an edited collection, so it's many people's voices on this specific subject, and it comes out February 6th, 2024. The description says, the much anticipated follow-up to the groundbreaking anthology Disability Visibility, another revolutionary collection of first-person writing on the joys and challenges of the modern disability experience and intimacy in all its myriad forms. What is intimacy? More than sex, more than romantic love, the pieces in this stunning and illuminating new anthology offer broader and more inclusive definitions of what it can mean to be intimate with another person. Explorations of caregiving, community, access, and friendship offer us alternative ways of thinking about the connections we form with others, a vital reimagining in an era when forced physical distance is at times a necessary norm. But don't worry, there's still sex to consider, and the numerous ways sexual liberation intersects with disability justice. Plunge between these pages and you'll also find disabled sexual discovery, disabled love stories, and disabled joy. These 25 stunning original pieces, plus other modern classics on the subject, all carefully curated by acclaimed activist Alice Wong, include essays, photo essays, poetry, drama, and erotica, a full spectrum of the dreams, fantasies, and deeply personal realities of a wide range of beautiful bodies and minds. Disability Intimacy will free your thinking, invigorate your spirit, and delight your desires. Oh my gosh, I mean, what more do you need to hear? I'm really excited about this one. I like that it includes a variety of different type of media, so not just the creative essay, but as you saw, photo essays, poetry, drama. I feel like it shows the spectrum of perspectives that we can kind of analyze this subject, the idea of disability, especially in a modern lens, from various voices, from various viewpoints. So I think it's just going to be very informative, but in a very unique way. And so that's why I think that I'll definitely try to get my hands on this. But now I didn't even pay attention to the fact that there was a collection that came before this, Disability Visibility. So I might check out my library's selection and see if they have this, or if there's a way I can get it either through Libby or Hoopla, because I'm also interested in that. So that one, as I said, comes out February 6, 2024. And if you're looking to diversify your shelves, maybe in a way you didn't think about, not just through inclusion of race, inclusion of translations, of various gender perspectives and sexual orientation. Don't forget that we do have a community of people with disabilities, of disabled creatives who also need their voices to be promoted in any way possible. Now, this one, just the title, the cover, honestly just drew me in immediately, and I can't wait to share it to you. So this one is called Dinner on Monster Island. It is another collection of essays, but this one, rather than it being an anthology, a collection of various people's voices, it's by one author, and that author is Tania de Rosario. I'm not sure if I'm saying that name correctly, but it also comes out February 6th, 2024, so it's the second book that comes out that same day. Also, before I get into the synopsis for Dinner on Monster Island, I do want to provide a bit of a content warning. There are mentions of discrimination towards those who are part of the queer community, of familial disputes, of abuse, religious connotations, and religious persecution, or the persecution of those a part of the LGBTQ plus community through the lens of religion, with religion being used as a weapon, is how I should be phrasing that. So just kind of prepare yourself for that. I'm only reading the synopsis, but it's very overt. So if you don't necessarily feel like you're in a place to hear me read the synopsis aloud, please move forward in the time. The timestamps are below, so you don't have to hear my description of this book. The description is: in this unusual, engaging, and intimate collection of personal essays, Lambda Literary Award finalist Tania de Rosario recalls growing up as a queer, brown, fat girl in Singapore, blending memoir with elements of history, pop culture, horror films, and current events to explore the nature of monsters and what it means to be different. Tania de Rosario was just 12 years old when she was gay exorcised. Convinced that her boyish style and demeanor were a sign of something wicked, her mother and a pair of her church friends tried to banish the evil from Tania. That day, the young girl realized that monsters weren't just found in horror tales. They could lurk anywhere, including your own family and community, and look just like you. Dinner on Monster Island is Tania's memoir of her life and childhood in Singapore, where she discovered how difference is often perceived as deviant, damaged, disobedient, and sometimes demonic. As she pulls back the veil on life on the small island, she reveals the sometimes kind, sometimes monstrous side of all of us. Intertwined with her experiences is an analysis of the role of women in horror. Tania looks at films and popular culture, such as Carrie, The Witch, and The Ring, to illuminate the ways in which women are often portrayed as monsters, and how, in real life, monsters are not what we think. Moving and lyrical, written with earnest candor, and leavened with moments of humor and optimism, Dinner on Monster Island is a deeply personal examination of women's experience, grappling with her identity, and a fantastic analysis of monsters, monstrous women, and the worlds in which they live. So I am especially gravitating towards this because it does provide a unique perspective. The author growing up in Singapore, dealing with her own queer identity, surrounded within a community that finds it a negative thing and an aversion to avoid, or to, in this point, exercise from oneself, from one's identity. And I think it's going to definitely be a hard read. It won't be an easy one. It'll be one that I have to mentally prepare for, but I am willing to take that on because de Rosario has trusted her readership to be mentally and emotionally prepared for this, to kind of join her in this healing process, what I'm assuming it's going to be. So this might not be the type of reading for everyone, depending on where you are in your own life, in the own type of experiences that you are ready and willing and able to experience in someone else's eyes. So just know your own limits. You can always return to this title after its publication, after it's been a time for yourself to prepare for something like this. This is your reminder to consider subscribing to my channel. Maybe you're new here, maybe you've seen my content before and you're kind of holding off to see if I'm the right booktuber for you. That's fine, but if you've already kind of gotten to this point and you really enjoy yourself, then maybe just subscribe or like the video, consider commenting at the end. Really, any way that you can support my small channel, I greatly appreciate it. All right, back to the content. Okay, pushing on. So the next book that is on this list includes Grief is for People. This is by Sloane Crossley, and I have a specific reason why I'm really excited for this book. We'll get into that once I get to that section. I'm trying to follow a formula here. This title comes out February 27th, 2024. This is yet another book where I want to just give a slight content warning before giving you a description of it. So this will touch upon the idea of loss of a friend through that friend's choice to take their own life, mourning that loss, trying to understand that grief. So just kind of be prepared for that. Anyway, disarmingly witty and poignant, Sloane Crossley's memoir explores multiple kinds of loss following the death of her closest friend. Grief is for People is a deeply moving and surprisingly suspenseful portrait of friendship, and a book about loss packed with verve for life. Sloane Crossley is one of our most renowned observers of contemporary behavior, and now the pathos that has been ever present in her trademark wit is on full display. After the pain and confusion of losing her closest friend to suicide, Crossley looks for answers in friends, philosophy, and art, hoping for a framework more useful than the unavoidable stages of grief. For most of her adult life, Sloane and Russell worked together and played together as they navigated the corridors of office life, the literary world, and the dramatic cultural shifts in New York City. One day, while Russell is still alive, Sloane's apartment is broken into. Along with her most prized possessions, the thief makes off with her sense of security, leaving a mystery in its place. When Russell dies exactly 1 month later, his suicide propels her on a wild quest to write the unwritable, to explore what constitutes family and possession as the city itself faces the staggering toll brought on by the pandemic. Crossley's search for truth is frank, darkly funny, and gilded with a resounding empathy. Upending the grief memoir, Grief is for People is the category-defying story of the struggle to hold on to the past without being consumed by it. A modern elegy, it rises precisely to console and challenge our notions of mourning during these grief-stricken times. So this wouldn't be the first time I've read something by Sloane Crossley. She is a novelist, and one book that I've read by her that I gave 5 stars, I absolutely adored it, was called Cult Classic. Honestly, I devoured that book. You know what's so funny about it is when I started my library job, among the many jobs I have, that was the first book I borrowed from that library that I was placed at. It was a new book, just came in that day that I started, and I was given the job of kind of logging them in, making sure that they were added to the collection and putting them on the shelves. And when I saw this book, I asked the person training me, can I actually take this home so that I can read it? And of course she said, yes, this is the whole benefit of you working in a library is you also having access to these books. So if no one is on hold for it, just take it home, borrow it. You're also a patron as well as an employee. So I borrowed it, read it in a week, and brought it back. And it's just, I cannot help but keep recommending it. And so because I really love her fiction, obviously I've only had one experience with it, but I really enjoyed that book. I want to support her nonfiction as well, especially because this does seem to be a really important topic. You'll see a trend in the various nonfiction books I pick that a lot of them discuss friendship in various ways. And I think that that's a topic, a certain type of interpersonal relationship that I am super fascinated in. I find that it's so important. I actually think I'm more interested in that than any other type of interpersonal relationship. And so, yeah, like that's why I definitely am going to be reading this in 2024. And for those who are interested in diversifying their shelves, continuing to diversify it, Sloane Crossley is a well-known Jewish American author as well. And so if you realize that you don't tend to have many Jewish voices on your shelves, then I highly recommend that you include her voice when you're trying to make that situation fixed. What is it? Remedy the situation. Fix the situation. English. And the final book that is coming out in February that I have on this list is Whiskey Tender, a memoir. This is by Deborah Taffa. It comes out February 27th, 2024, so at the same time as Grief is for People. And this one is described as reminiscent of the works of Mary Karr and Therese Marie Mailhot, a memoir of family and survival, coming of age on and off the reservation, and of the frictions between mainstream American culture and Native inheritance, assimilation and reverence for tradition. Deborah Jackson Taffa was raised to believe that some sacrifices were necessary to achieve a better life. Her grandparents, citizens of the Quechan Nation and Laguna Pueblo tribe, were sent to Indian boarding schools run by white missionaries, while her parents were encouraged to take part in governmental job training off the reservation. Assimilation meant relocation, but as Taffa matured into adulthood, she began to question the promise handed down by her elders and by American society, that if she gave up her culture, her land, and her traditions, she would not only be accepted, but would be able to achieve the American dream. Whiskey Tender traces how a mixed tribe Native girl, born on the California Yuma Reservation and raised in Navajo territory in New Mexico, comes to her own interpretation of identity, despite her parents' desires for her to transcend the class and Indian status of her birth through education, and despite the Quechan tribe's particular traditions and beliefs regarding oral and recorded histories. Taffa's childhood memories unspool into meditations on tribal identity, the rampant criminalization of Native men, governmental assimilation policies, the Red Power movement, and the negotiation process between belonging and resisting systemic oppression. Pan-Indian, as well as specific tribal histories and myths, blend with stories of a 1970s and 1980s childhood spent on and off the reservation. Taffa offers a sharp and thought-provoking historical analysis laced with humor and heart. As she reflects on her past and present, the promise of assimilation, and the many betrayals her family has suffered, both personal and historical, trauma passed down through generations, she reminds us of how the cultural narratives of her ancestors have been excluded from the central mythologies and structures of the melting pot of America, revealing all that is sacrificed for the promise of acceptance. Clearly, this memoir comes from an Indigenous voice, yet another way for you to diversify yourselves to ensure that you are getting a personal experience, someone who is speaking from modern day, who's reflecting on the various generations of her family and how assimilation within the American culture, the American government, society has negatively impacted her, has made her question her own identity and try to kind of figure out where she stands as far as acceptance of herself, acceptance of her history, and how to ensure that even if society around her doesn't accept it, she accepts it herself. So I'm really interested in this. I feel as though I can never read enough of Indigenous literature specifically, just because typically it goes hand in hand also with the environmentalist in me. I find the tradition of oral histories especially fascinating. That was already mentioned in this memoir, in this description of the memoir. So if you found this as interesting as I do, don't forget it comes out February 27th, 2004. No, 2024. Anyway, if my math is correct, I believe I've talked about 6 titles, meaning we've got 7 left to discuss in this group of 13, and the 7th book is Thunder Song Essays. That means it's another collection of essays. This is by Sasha Lapointe. It comes out March 5th, 2024, and as you can see, the cover is gorgeous. It's another kind of eye-catching cover with very interesting bright colors, so that immediately drew my attention, but then I was sold even more by the description. So it says, the winner of the 2023 Pacific Northwest Book Award for her memoir Red Paint, Sasha Lapointe returns with a razor-sharp, clear-eyed selection of essays on what it means to be a proudly queer Indigenous woman in America today. drawing on a rich family archive as well as the anthropological work of her late great-grandmother. LaPointe explores themes ranging from Indigenous identity and stereotypes to cultural displacement and environmental degradation to understand what our experiences teach us about the power of community, commitment, and conscientious honesty. Unapologetically punk, the essays and Thundersong segue between the miraculous and the mundane, the spiritual and the physical, as they examine the role of art, in particular music, and community in helping a new generation of Indigenous people claim the strength of their heritage while defining their own path in the contemporary world. You see another theme as well, this idea of kind of reflecting on past experiences, history within one's culture, within the history of one's nation, and trying to kind of grapple with it from a modern day perspective. I find it really interesting that LaPointe is not only an Indigenous woman, but she's also a queer woman. That is a combination that I personally haven't seen as far as literary voices go. That is probably a fault that I should be bearing on my own shoulders. I'm in no way suggesting that LaPointe is the only queer Indigenous woman who's publishing in modern day society or ever. But as soon as I saw that, I realized that that is something that I'm missing from my own library, from my own experience as a reader. And so I find that really interesting. And in the past, I really enjoyed essays. Again, they take me a long time because I kind of like to sit with them and enjoy them. But I'm willing to take a chance. And honestly, it's okay. If it takes me a month to read this book because I'm taking my time with it, that probably means that it's actually more meaningful to me because I know that my time with it is precious. So I am really looking forward to this one. And now we move on to book number 8. This one has a really interesting title, which is what also made me kind of decide, okay, I've got to click on this, let me investigate it and see if it's something I would want to read. It's called Ghost Dogs on Killers and Kin. This is by Andre Dubus. I'm not sure if I'm saying his last name right, so I do apologize if it's actually meant to be pronounced in like a French way or some other type of like pronunciation format. So this book comes out in March on the 5th. In 2024, same publication date as Thundersongs, actually. And here is the description for this book. During childhood summers in Louisiana, Andre's grandfather taught him that men's work is hard. Ever after, whether tracking down a drug lord in Mexico as a bounty hunter or grappling with privilege while living with a rich girlfriend in New York City, Andre worked at being a better worker and a better human being. In his longest essay, If I Owned a Gun, he reflects on the empowerment and shame he felt in keeping a gun and his decision ultimately to give it up. Elsewhere, he writes of violent youth and of settled domesticity and fatherhood, about the omnipresent expectations and contradictions of masculinity, about the things writers remember and those they forget. In conversation with writers and thinkers, Ghost Dogs renders moments of personal revelation with emotional generosity and stylistic grace, ultimately standing as essential witness and testimony to the art of nonfiction. I wasn't just, gravitating towards this interesting title, but I am fascinated in the fact that this description mentions the complexities surrounding men's relationship with masculinity in society, the fact that one wants to be masculine, but one also feels shame in being masculine depending on what the definition is and what's going on. I know that some people feel a bit triggered or feel a bit defensive when one throws around the idea of toxic masculinity, but masculinity doesn't have to be toxic. There's a type of masculinity that is toxic, just like there's a type of femininity that's toxic. We don't talk about that enough, if I'm going to be honest. So I do find it interesting that this author, Dubus, is willing to investigate his own relationship with this kind of manly man stereotype that was encouraged for him to replicate by his grandfather, by those around him, and his kind of investigation of privilege as well. So yeah, this one is one that just came out of left field for me, but I'm really excited about it, and I really hope that the reviews are positive for it, because I do think that this is going to be one that I'm going to want to read at some point, even if I don't end up pre-ordering it myself. And next we are moving into, oh no, we still are in March. Oh my gosh, there are so many great books coming out in March. This one is called The Translator's Daughter. It's a memoir, unsurprisingly. It's by Grace Lowe Prasad. This one again comes out March 5th, 2024. That is a big day in the publishing industry, apparently. The cover is super intricate and interesting in itself, but the description will definitely catch your eye. A Taiwanese American writer unfurls themes of memory, dislocation, language, and loss to tell a unique story about reclaiming one's heritage while living in diaspora. Born in Taiwan, Grace Lowe Prasad was 2 years old when the threat of political persecution under Chiang Kai-shek dictatorship drove her family to the United States, setting her up to become an accidental immigrant. The family did not know when they would be able to go home again. This exile lasted long enough for Prasad to forget her native Taiwanese language and grow up American. Having multilingual parents, including a father who worked as a translator, meant she never had to develop the fluency to navigate Taiwan on visits. But when her parents moved back to Taiwan permanently when she was in college and her mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, she recognized the urgency of forging a stronger connection with her birthplace before it was too late. As she recounts her journey to reclaim her heritage in The Translator's Daughter, Prasad unfurls themes of memory, dislocation, and loss in all their rich complexity. The result is a unique immigration story about the loneliness of living in diaspora, the search for belonging, and the meaning of home. Yeah, this one I think will be an especially poignant memoir that is reminiscent but unique in its own way. Me comparing these stories, especially because I'll be naming memoirs by other Asian writers, I recognize they're coming from different cultures, different backgrounds, different family situations, but these are the ones that came directly to my head. The Magical Language of Others by E.J. Ko is a memoir that I still think about today, and the reason why I'm gravitating towards that one is by a Korean American author and her own relationship with her mother, with the various women in her family, and I'm gravitating towards the idea of dislocation, memory, and language, especially because within E.J. Ko's memoir, she actually includes the copies of letters that her mother wrote to her in Korean when her family moved back to South Korea and she remained in the United States. And so that connection, I loved that memoir so much, to the point that I cannot wait to devour everything that E.J. Ko creates since then. So I think that this is probably up my alley, as well as the idea of dealing with families' illnesses as well. I haven't read this, and I don't think I'm mentally prepared to read it. So I don't know if I'm mentally prepared to necessarily read this one with Alzheimer's, but Crying in H Mart is another narrative written by an Asian American author whose mother is dealing with her diagnosis with cancer, the parent loss, and all those types of things. And so again, I'm not emotionally ready to tackle that specific book, but because that one was so strong and so poignant, I'm hoping that this one, The Translator's Daughter, also finds that community, because those who adored that book hopefully will want to devour this one too. Again, comes out March 5th, 2024. Okay, the thing is, I'm about to give you book 10 on this list, and I just realized that I haven't even covered all of the books that I'm the most excited for. I know I've talked about how I'm excited for every single one of these books, but there are a couple coming up in these last 4 books that I am genuinely so motivated to read, and this is one of them. So this is called Committed: On Meaning and Madwomen. It's by Suzanne Scanlon. It comes out April 16th, 2024, so yes, we have to wait a while, but I'm so interested in this. It's a memoir, but I imagine there's going to be a lot of history involved with it as well, as far as the kind of depiction of the Madwoman throughout history across the globe. And let's just get into this description. Okay, so before I get into this description, there is again discussion about maybe psychiatric institutions, taking one's own life or the attempt to do so, mental health. And so just prepare yourselves. If this is another title you're not ready to discuss at the moment, please fast forward and go on to the next pre-order that I'm excited about. A raw and masterful memoir about becoming a woman and going mad, and doing both at once. When Suzanne Scanlon was a student at Barnard in the 90s, Barnard College being an all-women's college based in New York City, grieving the loss of her mother, feeling untethered and swimming through inarticulable pain, she made a suicide attempt that landed her in the New York State Psychiatric Institute. After nearly 3 years and countless experimental treatments, Suzanne left the ward on shaky legs. In the decades it took her to recover from the experience, Suzanne came to understand her suffering as part of something larger, a long tradition of women whose complicated and compromised stories of self-actualization are reduced to, quote, crazy chick or, quote, madwoman narratives. It was a thrilling discovery, and she searched for more books, more women writers, as the journey of her life converged with her journey through the literature that shaped her. Transporting, honest and graceful, Committed is a story of discovery and recovery, reclaiming the idea of the mad woman as a template for insight and transcendence through the works of Charlotte Perkins Gilman, Virginia Woolf, Sylvia Plath, Janet Frame, Audre Lorde, Shulamith Firestone, and others. Honestly, this is going to be so fascinating. As someone who I guess is most interested in feminist scholarship, I feel as though this is going to be especially interesting with the various writers, creators, women creators who've been labeled as crazy or mad during their own lifetimes, as being emotional, as being hysterical at times. I'm really interested to see what Scanlon brings to the table when she's comparing her own experience and looking historically at the depiction of the mad women. So yeah, I'm April 16th, 2024, put it on your calendars, everybody. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this next one for many reasons, but we'll get into those in a second. So this book is called A Body Made of Glass, A Cultural History of Hypochondria. This is by Caroline Crampton, and it comes out April 23rd, 2024. I have the American cover up front. Caroline Crampton is British, but this cover is really lovely in its simplicity, but also that depiction of the artwork with the woman in the bath. I'm in love with it. So as I said, the book comes out April 23rd, 2024, and here is the description. Part cultural history, part literary criticism, and part memoir. A Body Made of Glass is a definitive biography of hypochondria. Caroline Crampton's life was upended at the age of 17 when she was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, a relatively rare blood cancer. After years of invasive treatment, she was finally given the all clear. But being cured of the cancer didn't mean she now felt well. Instead, the fear lingered, and she found herself always on the alert, braced for signs that the illness had reemerged. Now, in A Body Made of Glass, Crampton has drawn from her own experiences with health anxiety to write a revelatory exploration of hypochondria, a condition that, though often suffered silently, is widespread and rising. She deftly weaves together history, memoir, and literary criticism to make sense of this invisible and undercovered sickness. From the earliest medical case of Hippocrates to the literary accounts of sufferers like Virginia Woolf and Marcel Proust. In The Modern Perils of Internet Self-Diagnosis, Crampton unspools this topic to reveal the far-reaching impact of health anxiety on our physical, mental, and emotional health. At its heart, Crampton explains, hypochondria is a yearning for knowledge. It is a never-ending attempt to replace the edgeless terror of uncertainty with the comforting solidity of a definitive explanation. Through intimate personal stories and compelling cultural perspective, A Body Made of Glass brings this uniquely ephemeral condition into much-needed focus for the first time. I'm so excited. Okay, so a little bit of bias here is that Caroline Crampton is the host, the creator of She Done It, the podcast that I work for. And so I'm so excited for her. She's done so much work for this specific book. And actually, when she was first telling me about this project, I hadn't realized how personal the topic was for her. And so I'm even more invested. I hope that you all can support her in the same way I intend to, because I'm going to tell you right now, I'm 100% pre-ordering this. I can't wait to read it. I just think it's going to be super informative. If anyone has listened to the She Done It podcast, they know for a fact that Caroline is very much dedicated to her research. She will not leave any stone unturned. And so I highly recommend it for those who are interested in this topic of hypochondria, of this constant fear, the nerves, the anxiety that come with it, the way that it can come out as bodily symptoms. And so I'm honestly so excited for it. So please, please, please check out this title, A Body Made of Glass by Caroline Crampton. Okay, I've got 2 more titles, and honestly, I'm so convinced to pre-order these as well. I feel like I said I'm probably only going to pre-order a couple of these, but now that I'm going through all of them, I'm so afraid that I'm just going to end up pre-ordering them all because they all just sound so good. So anyway, 12 out of 13 on this list of nonfiction books to potentially pre-order. We have First Love, Essays on Friendship. I told you this idea of friendship is something really interesting to me. So this is by Lily Dansiger. I'm not sure if I'm saying her last name correctly, but it is a collection of essays, and it comes out May 7th, 2024. So you have a lot of time to think about it, but if this sounds great to you, remember, pre-orders are so important. They help everyone, so keep that in mind. This description says, a bracing, intimate essay collection about the power and complexity of female friendship in the wake of violence, from the critically acclaimed author of Negative Space. When Lily Dansiger, when her beloved cousin, Sabina, was murdered just as both girls were entering their young adult lives, the shock and grief altered her perception of what it meant to be a woman in the world, and rippled through her closest friendships. The loss of her first love, Sabina, becomes the springboard for this bold and refreshing exploration of the bonds between women, from the intensity of adolescent best friendships and fluidity of sexuality to mothering and chosen family. Each essay in First Love is grounded in a close female friendship in Dansiger's life, expanding outward to dissect cultural assumptions about feminine identity and desire, and the many ways women create space for each other in a world that wants us small. Seamlessly weaving personal experience with pop culture and literature, ranging from 19th century fairy tales to true crime, Anais Nin and Sylvia Plath, to Heavenly Creatures and the Sad Girls of Tumblr, Dansiger's essays form a kaleidoscopic story of a life told through friendships and an incisive exploration of what it means to love each other. First Love elevates friendships to the love stories they truly are, giving them the deep consideration that romantic relationships have enjoyed for centuries. Though friendship will never be enough to keep us safe from the dangers of the world, Dansiger reminds us that love is always worth the risk, and that when tragedy strikes, it's our friends who will help us survive. I'm really fascinated by that. I will say the only small criticism I have in this description is the use of female friendships, when I think that it could be focusing on women friendships. I feel it feels a bit exclusionary to focus on sex rather than discussing it through gender. But again, that's because I'm a feminist scholar. My focus is to talk about gender politics, gender roles, gender discussion, and so those are the realms I prefer to talk in. But I am really interested in this one, especially the idea of focusing on friendships, of platonic relationships, more than on romantic ones, especially because there's so much power and safety and comfort in friendships. And honestly, the loss of a friendship, I think, in my opinion, in my experience, is 10 times more painful than any other type of relationship lost. So I am very intrigued by this one, and again, it comes out May 7th, 2024. And this one, last but not least, even though it comes out the latest in 2024 on this list, that in no way means that it should be the last one you consider to pre-order, because I'm going to be pre-ordering it. Again, spoiler alerts, I 100% am going to be buying this book, and it is called Uncivilised: 10 Lies That Made the West. The author is Subhadra Das. I also have a personal investment in this author in my own way, and we'll get into that in a second, but it comes out May 14th, 2024. The cover is just super simple but awesome. I love it. I'm so excited for it. The description says, "Some things are a given. Knowledge is power, time is money, justice is blind. But many of the big ideas that underpin Western civilization are just that, ideas. Taking cues from Greek philosophy and honed in the Enlightenment, certain notions about humanity and society grew into the tenets we still live by today, and we haven't questioned them a great deal since. But what if they're not just ideas? What if they're outright lies? Isn't it time we ask who really benefits from the values at the core of our society? What is unbiased about a science that conjured up race? What do laws and nations actually protect? What even is art? And the real question, is the West really as civilized as it thinks it is? Uncivilized puts everything back on the table and asks readers to reconsider what they thought they knew about civilization, starting with the 10 lies that have shaped their lives." Just to give you a bit of description of the author, because I think that's really important to know that, like, she's an expert, so that she's the perfect person to be discussing this. Subhadra Das is a writer, historian, broadcaster, and comedian who looks at the relationship between science and society. She specializes in the history and philosophy of science, particularly the history of scientific racism and eugenics. For 9 years, she was curator of the science collections at University College London, where more recently she was also researcher in critical eugenics at the Sarah Parker Redmond Center for the Study of Racism and Racialization, working with Paul Gilroy. She has written and presented podcasts and stand-up comedy shows, curated museum exhibits, and regularly appears on radio and TV. The personal bias that I have in this is that she was a guest on the She Done It podcast. So not only do I have Caroline's book on here, A Body Made of Glass, but I also have Subhadra Das on here because she was a brilliant guest. She was so fascinating. She discussed race and how it's depicted across detective fiction. She includes Agatha Christie in that, and it was just such a great conversation that I 100% have to support her, and I'm really looking forward to it. So those are the 13 books that I 100% recommend you just check out, see if you're interested in them, and maybe add one or two to potential lists. See, even the traffic outside is excited about these titles. If you aren't in a position to pre-order, maybe request them at your library. Let the libraries know that they're coming out so that your public libraries can add them to their budget, add them to their list of nonfiction books that they inevitably are buying every single year, because I will be doing the same with the library I work for, letting them know that these titles exist, and so maybe we should add them to our inventory. With that said, there are going to be a few that I personally am going to pre-order because I have the means, because I am actually in a good financial position to do that. So don't feel obligated to do the pre-ordering route if you can't. You notifying your library, borrowing them when you see them in stock at your library is also a great way to support the author. What nonfiction titles are you most excited for? Are there any books coming out in 2024 or maybe in November and December that I've missed? If you are participating in Nonfiction November, what books that are nonfiction on your shelves are you going to read? I still have to figure out which ones I'm going to focus on. There are just so many, and I really need to prioritize them. So anywho, again, welcome to all of my new subscribers. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you found this video very interesting, or at least exciting in some way, some shape or form. Let me know in the comments. Maybe like the video, whatever way you can support my channel. I really do appreciate it. So I hope you all have a great day, and maybe I'll see you in November doing Get a Clue Readathon or Nonfiction November. Okay, bye guys.